Hi, I'm Susan Evans from susanevans.org, and today we have a um, a workshop called The End Game: Setting Long-Term Goals for Your Children. A lot of people set short-term goals for their lives, especially around January. You're used to goal setting. You're probably used to goal setting in your children's lives with regards to homeschooling, what they are going to accomplish in a specific school year. However, if you don't establish long range goals, then you will not accomplish the biggest things that you want to accomplish in your kids' lives. Okay, so how do you set long range goals for your children? What you do is you keep the end in mind. What do you want your children to have accomplished by the time they leave home? All right. And these can be skills, knowledge, and character. So all these different goals can be established in your kids' lives so that you are building towards these goals in what you are doing with your kids. Now, you can do it in different subject areas. For example, um, one of the skills that I wanted my kids to learn before they left home is to be able to swim. Okay, if you are in a boat and you capsize and are in the water, you need to be able to at least tread water and get to the shore. So those types of skills you want to make sure that your kids have before leaving home. So that kind of a skill would be classified under PE, for example. Okay, so you need to know what you want to accomplish in your students' lives so that you are doing the things that matter rather than only doing things that are short term in your uh, in each school year. Okay, let me explain. First off, character. Now, in our kids' lives, we want to establish strong character, like a strong work ethic, kindness, these kinds of things, patience, contentment, generosity. Any of these things are things that we want to establish in our kids. Now, if we're only focused on academics and we're not focused on their character, then the result of that long term will be not good character, even if you do accomplish the academics. Okay, so um, if you are working on, for example, if you have small children and you are practicing self control and obedience, then you can do um, activities to help them to grow in the area of obedience or in the area of self control. So, for example, in the area of obedience, you could have your kids running around the room, and then you say the word stop, and then they stop and they freeze where they are. So they learn to obey when you say the word stop. Okay, this happened with our kids when they were toddlers and preschoolers, and the boss of my husband was giving us a boat ride one day, and we were going down to the water, and the kids were just running, and I said, stop, and they immediately stopped, and that was very impressive to my husband's boss because the kids were obedient. Um, a lot of times kids are not don't pay attention to their parents' voice, and this is something that can be trained into your children, and you can have activities and have lessons on obedience, like um, if you have a faith-based homeschool and you use the Bible as your source for spiritual inspiration, and then you can have examples from Scripture. Bible stories of people who obeyed and people who disobeyed, and what were the results of obedience and the results of disobedience, because we have consequences for our actions, what we do and what we don't do. Okay, so um, if you are if you want to establish character in your kids, you need to be proactive in establishing that character. Okay, so a lot of days when kids were complaining, I would stop what we were doing, and I would address the character issue first, even if it meant that we did not finish all the academics that we needed to do that day. Academics are easy to catch up on compared to character, that is something that lasts a lifetime. There are character qualities that kids are born with that need to have people need to overcome. Okay, so some of these things, for example, are selfishness. People take care of their own interests and they want what they want, and so a natural thing for somebody, even as toddlers, and you can tell by toddlers pulling a toy away from another toddler, and so uh, people have their own self-interest, and so if you want to establish sharing or establish how would that other person feel, so you can discuss how it feels to someone else to have something taken away, and you explain that to your child or whatever. So these are some ways that you can establish character in your children. The same thing with kids are born, most kids are born lazy, and so diligence is something that you can instill in your kids by whenever they are working hard, you tell them that they are a hard worker and they come to see themselves as a hard worker. And you give them positive reinforcement for being productive with their time, and then they see things that they accomplish with their lives, and that gives them a sense of purpose and a sense of well-being that they've accomplished something, and so they have positive reinforcement built in when they are doing things that are productive and positive. So, so that's one way to establish character, is by discussing it, giving examples either from your own life or from the Bible, or from other people's lives, and then instilling those character qualities in your kids when they come up. Okay. All right, so those are character qualities. Now, in the areas of skills and in the areas of knowledge. Now, skills are like reading, writing, and math, but also skills can also be driving can be a skill. Learning CPR can be a skill. Knowing how to take care of your body can be a skill. Um, all these different things are skills. So, reading, writing, and math, what are some long range goals that you want your kids to accomplish in reading, writing, and math? Okay, so reading, you would want your kids to develop fluency in reading. First off, to be able to read smoothly, to be able to read then on a high school level and then on a college level. By the time they leave home, are they able to read on a college level? Because if they can't, then they won't. There are some things they won't be able to read. Um, and so if you build in vocabulary, for example, and read like the classics of literature to your kids as they grow up, then they have a larger vocabulary and are better able to understand all the different levels, all the way up to college level reading. Um, to write effectively is important, and to have voice in your writing. So teaching your kids how to have spunk, and like if they're a humorous kid, then does that humor come out in their writing? If they're just blunt and honest, is that how they write? And so if your voice of your personality comes out in your writing, then your writing is so much more alive and more clear and more exciting. So I always wanted my kids to learn how to write that way, and that's what I taught them to do. I have some creative writing courses on my website, susanevans.org. One of them is time travel, and it's creative, and it teaches kids how to have voice in their writing. And it's very hands-on, where I'm dressed up in costumes and stuff. So that's one of the things that I considered important. Um, I was a school teacher before I had kids, and I've graded a lot of writing, and a lot of writing is very tedious and boring. And so that was one thing I did not want for my kids, to have to just crank out um, writing that has no life to it. Okay. So that's one thing I wanted my kids to be able to do, is to have alive writing that's alive. I wanted them to be exposed to drama and theater. I wanted to take them to see theatrical performances, and to be able to do skits and things like that, so that they can learn to project their voice, how to give a speech presentation, um, in order to communicate effectively verbally. I wanted them to be able to communicate effectively. I wanted them to have sharp listening skills and reasoning skills. I wanted them to have basic understanding of logic and critical thinking skills, and to be able to read and discuss a wide range of classical literature. So if you start um, reading classical literature to your kids, just as read alouds over the years, even into the high school years, your kids will have a greater, richer understanding of life, because they will have those vicarious experiences of those people in the different time periods, and also, like for example, if they study Shakespeare in college, Shakespeare often quotes from other works of literature, um, like from Greek mythology, for example, and so the more understanding and knowledge they have from great classic works of literature, the more educated they are, and the more they're able to relate to more people, a greater variety of people, um, because they can understand what some people are saying about other works of literature. So that's some of the skills in language arts of reading and writing. What about math? Okay. I did want my kids to know addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, of course. I wanted them to be able to do algebra, algebra 2, geometry, and if my kids wanted to go into higher level math in college, then I wanted them to be able to take pre-calculus before they graduated, so that they would be able to take higher level math in college. And my three sons took pre-calculus in high school, so that and two of them are going into mechanical engineering, and one is going into biology, microbiology, and so those science and math heavy um, majors, college majors, it's important that you learn how to think mathematically, and so you want those higher level skills. Um, if, like my daughter is loves creative writing, she's in the process of writing a book right now in her free time, and she's always been very creative. She loves to read. She reads lots of novels, and So she's more in the creative arts section. So not everybody is has to have that upper level math, especially pre-calculus. I never took pre-calculus in college or in high school for that matter. So not everybody has to have all that all the way up. But if you plan it out, then you can plan it over the course of all the years, and you'll have incrementally gotten to that place with your kids. Um, but if you don't plan it out, then they might not have enough time in high school to take it, for example. Now, with math, I wanted my kids also to have good estimation skills and practical math skills. I wanted them to be able to have financial savvy, business skills, and budgeting skills. And one of the things that I really wanted them to be able to do is to manage money well. And one of the things that we used for this was Dave Ramsey's Foundations in Personal Finance for High School. This was a homeschool course that had DVDs with Dave Ramsey that were quite humorous and interesting, and it had tests and workbook and everything. And so we were able to watch it as a family, these DVDs, and then we were able to discuss what it meant to not spend all of your income, saving money, interest earned on different things. And so it's important to know not just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It's important to know how to balance a checkbook, how to pay bills, this kind of thing. And you can even invite your kids, your teens especially, into like the bill paying, like how much it costs to make a payment on the house, or how much it costs for electricity or whatever. And so that kids know how to budget. This can also be used for budgeting for groceries, how much you spend each week or each month uh, on groceries and that kind of thing. Which leads to other practical skills that you can teach your kids, like how to cook is a very practical skill. This is something everybody needs because everybody is going to be eating for the rest of their lives. So basic cooking skills is important to teach your kids, and so that's also something that you will want to write down and make sure that you're moving towards. Now, a lot of times if your kids are very young, and if you have a baby, for example, you might cut back on some of the activities that you're doing. Other years, when you don't have any young children and no major emergency situations, you might do more with your kids. Okay, so for example, swimming skills, you might add that into your schedule on a year that you're not doing as much as some of these other years. That's why uh, seeing the long view of your goals can be helpful, because you can plan over the course of the years to have all these skills in place. Now, you can also have other PE skills. I wanted my sons, especially, but also my daughter, to know um, basic sporting skills. I'm not a big sports person. However, I wanted them to learn hand-eye coordination and things like this. And so um, with my three sons, we did Cub Scouts, and we participated in some sports, some group sports in different settings, group settings. Like we did flag football and basketball and soccer in different groups in the city. And that was just one quarter or a couple of quarters each. I'm talking about time-wise. A quarter of a year is 3 months. Um, But if you didn't want to participate in sports, you can go to Goodwill and buy a bat and a ball and some mitts, and then teach your kids how to bat a ball, teach your kids how to throw and catch and that kind of thing. The same thing with basketball. You can buy a basketball, you can go to YMCA, learn to shoot some hoops, those kinds of things. And so you can learn basic skills that are physical skills, so that if they ever play beach volleyball, for example, if you've taught them how to serve and how to, you know, how to pass the ball back over the net for volleyball, then they'll be able to play with people, just like shooting baskets. They'll be able to do that. And so if you have if you have goals that you have set for in these physical areas of skills for PE, then they'll have those basic skills even into the adult years. You should also teach your kids healthy nutrition and exercise. Healthy nutrition is especially important because um, your kids need to know, for example, that protein is something that will help them to think clearly, that lots of fruits and vegetables are important if you are going to remain healthy, because they have a lot of vitamins in them, and this sort of thing. And also to have exercise built into your day so that you are a healthy person. You function better when you are healthy. What other kinds of things in science, for example, what kinds of long range goals do you want your kids to know about science? I wanted them to understand scientific principles, including chemistry, physics, earth science, biology, all these kinds of things. I wanted them to have exposure to the creation versus evolution debate, so that they can see what each side is saying, and also to have a thorough appreciation of God's creation. Um, there was one year that when I taught my kids botany, which is the study of plants, we learned how to identify. I'm not sure if it was like 50 different plants by their leaves. And so when we were walking around an arboretum, my kids were able to say that is a maple tree, that is a pine tree, and they were able to identify different flowers and different trees and bushes and stuff like that. And so it's helpful to have knowledge, just just so that you're a more well-rounded person. And I wanted my kids to have knowledge of different rocks and minerals, knowledge of all these different things like stalactites and stalagmites in caves. So we went on a lot of field trips and that kind of thing. Um, one of my big things was I love to give my kids experiences because it makes them more interesting people. And so, for example, when we went on a family vacation one year, it was a very short family vacation. It was like maybe 3 days in total. But we went and we slept in a tree house, and that was in Oregon, on the border of Oregon and California. There's a place that has tree houses, and it's like a hotel, but you sleep in a room up in a tree, and that was super fun. And and so we've gone. We also I took my kids to Guatemala, where I grew up, which is south of Mexico, and I took them to all the places where I grew up, and the lake with the volcanoes and everything, and they got to know me and how I grew up and all the poverty um, from there. And because they saw the poverty, it opened their eyes. And then now, here in the United States, they know that they're rich. Okay? So there's some things that you experience that you're never the same after you experience those things. But there's also things that you experience as a family that bond you together as a family, and all of these things are positive. All these things are really good uh, for um, for the growth of each of your kids. Um, so let's see. So we talked about character, we've talked about reading, writing, and math, we've talked about science. How about history? History and geography. History, I wanted them to understand each of the time periods, and I wanted them to be able to locate on a timeline, uh, you know, basically what time period in history where each event, famous event, happened, and so we were able to do that. We had a place downstairs that had a timeline, and I have this on my blog, susanevans.org. If you press the button for blog and look up timeline, you'll see a picture of my timeline up at the top of my room downstairs, and each foot was 100 years, and so the whole history of the world was all wrapped around the room. It was really cool. And then I would put up little figures whenever we studied something, and that was really fun. Um, let's see. For geography, I wanted the kids to know the states and capitals and to locate each of the states. For world geography, wanted them to know the location of all the countries on Earth, and I wanted them to know the capitals, the countries and capitals of the most important, the countries that are the most popular as far as that people talk about. For example, Paris. Everyone talks about uh, Paris, France. Everyone talks about London, England. Um, all the most famous um, cities in the world and where they're located as well. Um, but I wanted even the obscure countries to be known, and so yeah, so like all the countries in Africa, and so we learned about all the countries and their capitals and their flags and everything, and then the more that they hear about different countries and places, um, especially in literature, like Around the World in 80 Days, had different countries, and so we did geography that year that we did Around the World in 80 Days. Um, and then I spent a whole year in high school with my daughter, specifically doing one country per day, and in which we did, she wrote a paragraph about that country, and then learned the capital of the country and had the flag, and I have a video on my YouTube channel, Susan C. Evans, that I show you her binder of geography. It's really cool. It has black pages, cardstock pages, and she glued her paragraph and her flag and the country that she colored in with the capital and everything. Um, so you could do geography, all kinds of different things about geography. When the kids were a lot younger, I did geography with all of my kids in elementary. We did a lot of geography, and sometimes we did a whole month just on China, or a whole month just on one country, okay, India or whatever. And so the kids had a very rich knowledge and understanding of geography growing up. And my daughter, because she was the youngest, she had the least, she remembered the least, which is why I did a lot more geography with her as a high schooler. Um, I also wanted my kids to understand the why behind major events in history and to understand the flow of history. Okay, and then also I wanted them to be exposed to world travel and also travel to different states. And um, one of my sister's children grew up, and at age 18 she got married, and so we drove across the United States all the way from Washington State, which is where we live, all the way to Tennessee, and we went to Mount Rushmore, and we went and we saw so many different sites along the way, all the way there and all the way back. And so, and every time we entered a different state, I had one of my kids reading, like a tour guide, everything about that state. Okay, so it was quite fun. We learned a lot, and they wrote little summaries on cards, postcards that we got from different places that we went along the way. So, foreign language, that's another skill that your kids can have. I wanted my kids to learn Spanish, and so we spent a bunch of time learning Spanish. You can also, teach your kids other languages, like my daughter right now is learning some Japanese. I learned, I took one semester of French when I was in college because I was already fluent in Spanish because I had grown up in Guatemala. So, um, anyways, it helps to have a foreign language, and also you could learn Hebrew or Greek or some classical students do Latin. I like doing Spanish because it's a live language, and you're still learning the Latin roots of those Spanish words. Music, you could. I wanted my kids to have a knowledge of the great classical composers and music. I wanted them to be able to carry a beat. I wanted them to have exposure to a symphony and jazz festivals and things like that. So I took my kids to a live symphony when they were young several times. One of them was a Bugs Bunny one. It was so fun. They were doing Bugs Bunny. The background of Bugs Bunny has a lot of orchestra. And so that's what they did, a whole um, orchestra, a symphony on Bugs Bunny. That was our favorite of all time. Um, I also tried to teach them to sing on key, and my daughter also has learned a little bit about harmonizing in singing. She's been in a choir at her church, for example. I also wanted them to know how to read basic notes for music, and if they were interested in an instrument, then we got them lessons. When I grew up, it was mandatory that we'd have 2 years of piano, and I hated it and I never used it. However, I know that when I'm singing, I can see how the notes go up and down and stuff, and so um, I am thankful that I have that skill, even though I didn't enjoy it because I'm not really a musical person. I waited until my kids showed interest. So my second son showed interest in guitar, so we gave him guitar lessons. My third son was interested in piano, and so he has, oh my goodness, he has excelled so much and so fast because he wanted to take lessons, and so um, they are able to practice on their own a lot better when it's something that is a something that they're good at and something that they enjoy. Um, but yes, I taught all my kids just basic music reading, like Every Good Boy Does Fine, for example. The notes on a sheet of paper for music. Okay, so art also, I wanted to have basic skills, have basic drawing skills, painting skills, maybe even crafting skills, to have all the knowledge of the great works of art and artists from history, and exposure to art museums. So I wanted them to have all these experiences. Okay, so these are just some of the ideas that I'm giving you of long range goals that I had for my kids going into homeschooling from the very beginning, so that I could be doing these and achieving these goals by the time my kids um, graduated high school. And and I have to say, I love the character of my kids. I love. It's never a waste to invest in your kids' lives, either through experiences that you're giving them to deepen their understanding of life. Um, Also, serving other people can be helpful, especially in different socioeconomic, um, uh, you know, different people of different races than you, different like a soup kitchen, for example, um, just being in different situations. So, like when we went to Guatemala, my kids were surrounded by Hispanic people, and so they understood that life is completely different in a different culture, and they see things differently, and just things that we take for granted they don't even have, like drinking water out of the faucet, is not something that you do in Guatemala. It makes us more grateful for what we have here in the United States. So, anyways, so these are some of the things that some of the goals that I had for my own students, and I encourage you to set your own long range goals for your kids in your homeschool. I'm Susan Evans from SusanEvans.org. Thanks for watching.